Hello there, my name is Sixo, but more on that later because I saw 3 ships come sailing in on Christmas Day in the morning. Alright, it's not quite Christmas yet, but you have to admit this thing is still pretty impressive either way, and I can't wait to check it out today. Before we begin though, I do want to say that this video is brought to you by TF Source, so you'll find a link to their site in the description below, and you can check them out for all your Transformers and third-party needs. I also want to acknowledge that this box is incredibly handsome. Fans Hobby have always done amazing work with their packaging, and this is no exception, and we're going through a real kind of Unicron trilogy Armada Renaissance at the moment, and this is quite heavily evocative of that era, let's say. And if you're not already excited for it, then the back will certainly get you there because it looks like it's got tons of play value as well. Can't wait. Fortunately though, we don't have to wait, do we? Because we can go ahead and actually check out the toy today. And this is one I've been curious about for quite some time, so I'll be interested to see how it fares. It's certainly quite impressive in terms of size anyway. Definitely looking the part. Got a rather nifty little clamshell here, but if we get that off, we should be able to see everything inside. Already this thing looks really, really good. Can't wait. Absolutely massive as well, but quite well packed. And we mustn't forget these 2 little guys. We've got a couple of mini-cons in here, so better retrieve those. And what a substantial package. I absolutely adore how easily accessible everything is right out the box, and it presents beautifully. I just don't know where to start. Let's get checking out those individual components. First up, we've got this rather nifty looking battleship component, which is super cool, nicely detailed, nicely painted as well. Like in typical Fans Hobby fashion, there's some really well applied little silver accents all over. The orange looks crisp here as well. Also quite nice and tidy overall. I mean, these bits don't really kind of peg in or anything, but they seem pretty stable. They're on ratchets, kind of just here for the shoulders, and no wheels or anything, which is something that they did include on the Titan release, the Hasbro Titan, which I thought was really clever. There's none of that here, but still, it looks good. Also a very subtle little use of a lick of translucent green plastic in there for the cockpit, so that's appreciated. And I often say that Fans Hobby are not ones to forget the fun factor, and so it is here, because there's actually a little mini-con port, which is a bit of a novelty, because not even the Titan has that, right? Like, you can put a mini-con on this if you want to, you don't have to. It actually just slides by itself, and if you push it down, then the guns will kind of all move in unison and back and forth, so that is pretty cool, I gotta say. I really like that. And additionally, you can actually position the little guns up and down as well, however you wish, whether it's at an angle or straight up, so that's kind of cool and will be good in robot mode, I suspect. Now, if you do want to go old school with it, then the minicons do have a little port for just such a thing, so you just pop them on like so, and then kind of slide them back and forth, which is, you know, maybe not the most elegant thing ever, but it's fun. Now, there's also some little missiles that come packaged with this guy, and they just slide into the front here and click into place. And then, of course, you have these little buttons on the side, which means that, yes, you have firing missiles, which honestly, I think Fans Hobby are like the only third-party company, certainly that I can think of right now, that are doing stuff like this. It's really cool. Anyway, here you can see a comparison with this component with the original Micron Legend Shockwave, which was the Japanese Tidal Wave release in cartoon colors, weirdly. But you can see that actually they look quite similar. Like, this really feels like a kind of oversized version of this in many ways, like a couple of refinements or kind of different details here or there, but very similar. Conversely, here you can see it with the significantly larger Titan version, which has a much darker purple and darker grey as well. And these are actually really different. Like, the Titan, weirdly, is the one that's gone for something quite unique in terms of the design, I think, in many ways, and we're going to see that throughout all of these components. Whereas this one, as I say, does stick quite closely to the original toy in terms of a lot of its inspiration. Like, a lot of that is down to the aesthetics and things like this, but it's also in things like the way that actually the turrets on these just spin by hand. You know, there's no mechanism, there's no mini-con ports or anything like this on the Titan version. You can just kind of position them however you want, whereas this kind of sticks to the old formula of using that mini-con port. So really interesting. Then we come to the second component, which I've always understood to be one of those like landing crafts that they used on the beaches in places like Normandy and things like this, and it looks pretty cool. I kind of dig the look of it overall. I mean, I think the wings are sort of shown up like so on the box and places like that, but I think they look pretty cool down as well. Now, whilst I think this is decent overall, there's no real getting around the fact that this is a very sizable and rather obvious pair of clompers on the end here, right? Like, those are obviously Tidal Wave's feet, and I do think the original hid those a little bit better, I will say. But hey, you know, there's some very attractive little silver detailing here. Always love the silver Fans Hobby do. It always kind of shines and looks really nice, and same along here, little orange bits. Now, unless I've missed it, I haven't seen it mentioned in the instructions, but there does seem to be a couple of little mini-con ports that you can just fold up on the end here, so don't believe they do anything, but you can actually just go ahead and peg those jets on there, if indeed you want to. I mean, it's an option, certainly. And you know, the underneath is pretty tidy as well, with all the panels sort of folding away into their place. Fans Hobby typically do this kind of thing pretty well. Some little orange detailing on the wings as well, that looks good. Anyway, here we have another comparison, and again, this is the original Micron Legend figure, or Armada figure, Armada design if you will. And you can kind of see here what I mean with these feet not being quite as successful with these, which actually do kind of look like ramps, if anything. The way these feet are folded down, it's much more subtle versus this. I also prefer, I think this is what was throwing me off on the wings, the way that these fold in much more to kind of, I don't know, to taper in and actually look like part of the design, whereas these just kind of stick up and do kind of feel a little bit awkward because of that. But still, you can see that there's a lot of cues of that original design going on here. And again, no great surprise, it's the Titan on the left there, which is significantly larger. And you can see that this one, again, the feet are really not as successful as what Hasbro have got going on with their design, which does look cleaner. It's got a flatter kind of bed and everything as well, so I think that maybe is a little bit more successful, the way the wings taper in and everything, but it's interesting to see nonetheless. And then we come to our final component, which is of course an aircraft carrier, although it looks a little bit plain at the moment, but as we'll see, there's more than meets the eye, because this one is actually the bit that's got the most play value. Now the first thing you want to do is flip open this little section just there, and then if you pop up this lever, you'll get, doesn't quite go perfectly, but you'll get, there you go, you can pull it out. You can get this little control tower just there with a little flip up radar. Does feel a little bit like, not fragile, but you'd want to be careful with it, right? Like it's very small plastic. Like I don't know about you, but I'll definitely be taking care with this thing. This one's kind of the most interesting to me in some ways, because the design, again, is very referential of that Micron Legend toy, even down to like the hands and the way the thumbs fold under here. It's not one for one, but you can definitely see the inspiration. And as I mentioned, there is quite a lot of play value involved here. Now, first things first, if you just prise up that little tab like so, then you can place the jets on the top of the aircraft carrier. Of course, they don't really scale, I don't think, but you know, is that ever a consideration in Transformers? I don't know. It works, it's fine. Honestly, just don't think about it. Now, if you press this little button here, then they go flying off onto the floor and you've got to go and find them. But you got to love it, haven't you? Now, the final gimmick here is something that was present on the original toy, and there's this little flip-up compartment just there, which is really, really cool. And then you can take one of your Minicons, either of them actually, and just pop them in like so, and then push it back down, and he's gone. Now, as I mentioned, there is a similar thing on the original, but actually you do it by pushing up just here, and then the little hidden compartment has a folded up jet like so. So again, very reminiscent in its way. And of course, we've got a comparison of those two components here. And actually, I think the Fans Hobby one shapes up pretty well. It's a little bit more kind of aircraft carrier shape than this one, which is maybe a little bit compromised, but I do love this one. Obviously, it's just an all-timer, and again, it's got the little wheels that help it to roll, which is something that isn't on the Fans Hobby. A little bit of a shame, but again, overall, I do think that Fans Hobby have done a good job here. And then here you can see the aircraft carrier versus the Hasbro one, and this is really interesting actually, because I think the Fans Hobby one maybe takes this slightly, like it's a little bit more refined. Hasbro one's not bad, but it's almost like every version of this character suffers in one of the components, and not sure this is the strongest element of the Hasbro one. Still like it, but the Fans Hobby one, pretty good. Now, what is very much appreciated and does feel quite in step with the original toy is that there are two Minicons included here, which is actually one more than the original, but they look really quite nice. Lovely little gold paint and everything on them. Two different jet designs, basically. And they're not too dissimilar for one another, actually. The robot modes seem to be almost the same, which is quite strange because the plane modes are different. I'm sure there's a reason for it that has escaped me right now, but there you go. To give you an idea, though, this little guy's pretty cool and does really feel like a Minicon of old. You just kind of fold the front of the jet back like that, fold his wings back, and then just extend his legs by pulling them down, and you're kind of done. I tell a lie, he's also got these little flip out heels at the back here as well, because otherwise he'd be very back heavy. And honestly, this little guy's pretty great. He's got nice paint applications, really tiny little face, but super detailed with some lovely red paint on it and things as well. Looks really cool, super articulated for the size of him, so I think quite impressive. And then here you can see him with essentially his big brother. I mean, they do look very, very similar, as I say, which I find kind of strange, but hey, you know, I'm not going to complain about having two Minicons included. It's a bit of a novelty. novelty these days. And then here you can see him versus the Micron Legend original, and honestly I think that compares pretty favourably. They've basically taken the original design and upgraded it in several senses, so good job. Which I think all told means there's a lot to like about this set. It's some quite impressive vehicles, but let's see how we get on with combining them. Now you want to start with the aircraft carrier by folding this little bit down again, back into the ship, just fold that away like so, and then fold this little flap over. And then at the rear you want to fold out these very clicky joints, which I think will be the shoulders in robot mode. Next up we've got the sort of armoured pontoon thing, so you want to actually fold these bits out to the front and kind of click them round to the side. Same thing over here, just bring it back and click it around like that. And then finally we've got the landing pod thing, and this actually has the most transformation going on for the combined mode. So first thing, you want to kind of bring these legs out, so just split that apart, and then on each side there's a bit of work to be done. So firstly you just fold this little panel up like that. That releases this little thinner panel inside. Now you want to bring this panel out. It's a very panel heavy design, needless to say. Another panel there. That then comes down to kind of fill in this gap. Just want to make sure that you get that lined up real nice if you can, and then fold this bit back down again. Exactly the same on this side, so just flip this little panel out. Now these little plastic panels do feel, I don't know, relatively secure, like a little bit flimsy maybe. I'd probably be careful the way that you manipulate them. Just, you don't want any undue breakages. And then once you've got both the legs done, you just flip the little wings down on the sides. It's then time to actually get to combining. Now, these little ports here are going to go into the sides of these sort of pontoon sections. So you just sort of slide that up, click it into place, and then I think there might need to be a little bit of manipulation, but there you go. That's all quite secure actually. And then before putting the leg sections on, you just need to flip out these little pieces from the sides of the back of this main warship component, and then you can see that the two halves are basically going to meet. So here we go, we'll just slide it up and into place and give it a big old push and a click, and then these leg sections are going to come into the side here and kind of fit under this piece. Now there is a little clip just in here as well to hold them into place, so it's just a question of getting it all lined up and clicked into place. That said, that tab, I don't know, it feels like more of a suggestion than anything. I don't know, it's not the most secure, like it's hanging fine. I don't know, I just expected it to kind of click with some oomph, and it's not quite done that for me. Let's try on this side, shall we? So just slide it up, get it under the front there as well, and then hopefully just click into place. And the resulting combined vehicle mode is pretty impressive actually. Like, you know, it definitely makes a first impression. Little bit of kind of stuff going on with the legs and that at the back, which we'll look at, but you know, it retains all of the features of the kind of individual modes. So you've obviously got those little guns going on and things which you can still use, so that's kind of cool. The little launchers at the front just here, the missile launchers here. There's definitely a bit of messiness on this rear end, right? Like those are very obviously legs, that's very obviously a kind of waist and kind of hip joints and things, so that's not really kind of covered up, if anything. It's just sort of quite prominently there. I guess it just sticks out a little bit because actually the rest of this is fairly cohesive overall. I mean, you can still see those feet on the side, but they do kind of blend in with these sort of pontoon things. I keep saying pontoons, is that the right thing? I don't even know. But yeah, they kind of blend in there. But you know, overall, nice job on this. I do think it looks really good. And look, I wasn't kidding when I said this felt fairly stable, right? Like I'm giving it a good old wiggle there. It's not coming apart at all, so feels quite nice and hefty too. Good job, I think. And then here you can see it versus the original design. Again, this is the Takara version in purple, and again, it's quite obvious how much the Fans Hobby one cribs off this one, right? Like, even down to the way that the transformation is done, things like this, it's all very, very similar. So, you know, as much as I'm kind of critiquing Fans Hobby for everything going on with the legs here, that's exactly how it is on the original. So, can't really take too many points off for it, can you? I don't know. It's doing what it set out to do. And then we can just about show you a comparison with the Hasbro version. We've just about got them both on the desk there. And this is really interesting actually, because the Hasbro one, bizarrely, takes a few more liberties with the original design. Like it kind of updates it and overhauls it quite a bit more. For example, the legs sort of completely separate. They're not kind of welded to this, kind of completely stuck on this hip piece. And I think it's for the better actually. It kind of means that it's a slightly more impressive overall design. You can just see here that there is some evidence of the hips and the kind of waist area and everything there, but because of the way these legs come off and then attach at the sides, I don't know, it just feels a little bit cleaner to me somehow. And I think the overall shape is just that bit more pleasing because of it. Still though, there's no denying that this thing is a lot of fun, and honestly, in the realm of third-party stuff, I think Fans Hobby, once again, really understand that it is about that fun, that's what kind of makes the ultimate difference, you know, stuff like the little firing missiles and the guns and mini-com ports and all of that kind of clobber. It adds so much, in my opinion. So it's not just like a kind of static or posable action figure that you whack on the shelf. It is something that you kind of want to enjoy, and I appreciate that. Of course, then we come to the main transformation, and the first thing you want to do is unattach those legs, which actually here do feel like they're in quite securely after all. Then you want to spin these round at the thighs so that they're facing completely the other way. Now we're going to work on those legs. You've got to bring this panel back out again. It's just got pushed in through being in the combined vehicle mode, and then flip this panel around onto the back of the legs, and then that allows you to truncate the whole thing down like so. Same on the other side. Bring that panel out, flip this one over, and then push the whole leg down. It's quite a strong mechanism, but still. Coming back around to the front, you can flip these little panels just on the front of the feet up like so for the ankles, and then unfold the feet like so. Same thing over here, flip that panel up, and then the feet are very easy to do. Now we have him standing, you just want to pull out this little section on his crotch like that, like a little drawer. And in quite a cool maneuver, you can split the aircraft carrier just right down the middle like so, and then start to bring the shoulders down. Now you kind of have to manipulate these up and then down a little bit like that. So just up a little bit and then down. Then you want to fold those little pieces from the back of the main vehicle component back into the sides. Rotate the whole thing at the waist. Now this next section's pretty cool. What I have discovered is that if you want to rotate this chest, it's actually locked if you have the cannons sort of facing outwards. So you need to bring them in like that, and then that will enable you, he says, there we go, to manipulate it and just bring it all the way around. Next we do the arms. So the first thing is you want to make sure that these little sections just kind of come down the side, and they don't actually click. They sound like they do, but they don't actually kind of click in as such. And then you can just rotate the arms at the sides like that, and then fold out the thumbs and the fingers if you really want to, and it's kind of a semblance of an arm. Same thing over here, just rotate at the shoulder, flip the thumb out, and then you can get access to those fingers to kind of manipulate them however you wish. Then if we come around to the rear, it's a pretty standard head flip situation. Just to get that out of there, and then fold it round and then close that back up. And then these wings are supposed to fold in on the side. I'm not sure why they left that till last in the instructions. And there we go. It's a lot of fun. I love the fact that you can transform him in the combined form, that you don't need to separate it into the kind of individual components, just like on the original toy and indeed the Hasbro version. And it's not a difficult process either, which means that it's one that you kind of want to repeat over and over, which is pretty cool. And the result looks undeniably handsome. It's definitely quite a showstopper in the robot mode. Looks a lot like the cartoon as well. Definitely a good kind of imitation of Tidal Wave, and yeah, I'm digging it. That's what I would say. I'm definitely digging it. I mean, look, there's no beating around the bush here. This thing is not as large as the Hasbro version. We'll do a comparison in a minute somehow. But yeah, it does sort of feel like maybe Fans Hobby were a little bit beaten to the punch by Hasbro on this one. And, you know, fair enough, that's the game ultimately. But there's still no denying that this thing does look really nice. I mean, first things first, it is still quite massive. Like, it's not a small toy by any means. So, you know, the fact that it's smaller than the HasLab does not make it tiny. And, you know, it's got nice proportions. It's quite lanky, particularly around the thighs and things like that. And I feel like that gives it a look much more similar to the original toy than the new Hasbro version, as we'll see. But it still looks really good in my opinion. Absolutely loving that head sculpt. It's really quite handsome, makes a good use of the kind of likeness of the character and all its oddities and everything else. Love the little yellow eyes, and what's really cool is that they've included a little magnetic feature as well, so if you do have a magnet to hand, one not provided I don't think, but it will allow the eyes to light up at the back, and that again just, I don't know, brings a bit of life to the toy as well, so nice touch. Now the battery didn't come installed, but Fans Hobby did include a spare battery in the box, so a big thank you for that, because honestly, after years of scrambling around trying to find the right batteries for these things, to actually be given one is just such a nice thing, let's put it that way. Now there is also a second optional face for this guy, which you can replace by removing the little head crest just there, and then getting the original face out, which is a wee bit fiddly, but a little tool or something should just help with that. And there's a little notch just there at the top of the nose. There we go. Yeah, okay, that actually looks quite freaky. Anyway, then we can go ahead and install the new face. Just slot it in like so and pop that head crest piece back on, and voila. And now he's shouting, Tidal Wave, he seemed to say. I think that looks pretty good. Worth mentioning that this package does include 2 additional faces for Meg Tyranno as well, Fans Hobby's Armada Megatron, and maybe that's better than the stock face. Some of you might prefer it. I still don't feel like they've quite nailed it, but it's an option at least. Alternatively, there is this second face, which is kind of a shouty thing, and yeah, there you go. Now coming back to Tidal Wave, there's some decent articulation on offer. The head is on like a big old ball joint, so good motion up and down as well. That's pretty cool. These shoulders are on very clicky ratchets. Can you hear that? I don't know. But yeah, exceptionally clicky. Now they will go only so far out to the side. If you pull them any further, then that comes off. So that's not exactly what you want. Now, of course, you do get a little bit of extra articulation because of these bits, which are not actually tabbed in at the side, which is kind of annoying actually, but it is what it is. But you can't really manipulate the arm to the side without sort of pulling that out like that. And I don't know, it doesn't look very appealing to me, but it's also not the strongest joint, so it will just kind of flop back down sometimes. Now there is a bicep rotation. You just need to be slightly aware of this panel here, kind of conflicting between the two because of the way it transforms. It's not a major problem, but there is also a double jointed elbow, which allows a lot of range of motion, so that's pretty cool. As for the hands, well, the thumb moves up and down just like it does for transformation, and then each of the fingers is separately articulated at 3 different points, which is pretty impressive actually. Now, there's not really much in the way of waist swivel going on, and that's because of this front piece and the way it sort of rotates down and sits on the front of his chest. It can rotate a little bit, and in theory there is waist swivel in there, as we've seen for the transformation, but this just completely blocks it. Decent articulation at the hips though, which again are on big old ratchets. You'll get about 90 degrees there. And those hips have got big ratchets too, although actually they're not the strongest. Like, there's a little bit of give in them, which is fine, but it does mean that in terms of posing, he sometimes feels like the legs are going to kind of, I don't know, just kind of come out from the side a little bit, but it's not too bad. Then for the knees, they'll go to 90 degrees, and those are quite soft ratchets in there, but still quite effective. And there's complete rotation in the ankles. You get a bit of movement in the toes just there. You can actually tilt those from side to side. That's how the ankle tilt works. All of which means he's pretty fun to pose actually. Like, there is a little bit of stuff going on, a few considerations like those slightly funky shoulders and the lack of waist articulation, but you know, the legs are really good, the arms are really good at the elbows. So overall, yeah, quite fun to handle in my opinion. I also really appreciate the fact that you can flip these guns up on his chest as well. They come all the way up, so they actually sit forward, which is a bit of a novelty because the original toy could definitely not do that. Finding these panels on the insides of the legs a little bit frustrating though, if only because they have a bit of a propensity for always kind of moving inward, like through motion. They just don't really sort of sit in the place that they're intended to, so not the end of the world, but slightly frustrating. And again, I do kind of wish these wings would fold away better than they do, because they just sort of, I don't know, they don't go far enough in, like that way they sort of stick out to the side, that way they don't go all the way back. It's a little bit cumbersome, and I feel like it was done better on both the original and the Hasbro versions. All told though, it's quite an impressive thing, and honestly, I'm struggling to imagine many people getting this thing in hand, posing it up, you know, getting it in robot mode and thinking, oh, I'm really disappointed with that. Honestly, it's very, very striking, and it's just fun. It's also, dare I say, a mightily impressive sight. This is Fans Hobby's own Meg Tyranno, and that's not a small toy by any means, but this new Tsunami dwarfs it, as you can see. It's a very cool sight to see these two together. And of course they do interact as well, as we're going to see shortly, but for now, yeah, this is looking pretty good. Alternatively, here you can see it versus Fans Hobby's other Unicron trilogy figures. I mean, you've got Fans Hobby Naval Commander and Energy Commander here, their Armada and Energon Optimus Primes, and again, I think it's a very, very noteworthy lineup. They're doing a brilliant job with these. Equally, I know some people are going to be interested to see it versus the recent Legacy Armada Optimus, and there you go. It actually works quite well, I think. Like, if you're not in the market for the Titan release, this could be an option, I guess. Alternatively, here he is with the original Micron Legend again, who looks rather cute by comparison, even though again, it's definitely not a small toy, but you can absolutely see the inspiration here. In many ways, the Fans Hobby one feels like a kind of souped up and slightly more modern take on that classic figure. It's got all the same hallmarks, a lot of similar play features, the proportions, where the paint is, all of that kind of stuff. It absolutely feels like a total homage to that. And I should stress that I mean that in the best possible way. I love that classic figure. So, I don't know, anybody that has a lot of nostalgia for Armada or this design, you're gonna feel a lot of that, I think, in the Fans Hobby effort. And it sort of succeeds in that way. It retains that sense of fun and play value that made the original so good. And all of that is quite ironic in a way, because surely there can be no greater comparison than with the Hasbro Titan release. And the reason I say it's ironic is because actually that thing makes the Fans Hobby figure kind of look like the original toy in many ways, just in terms of scale and everything else. I don't know, it's definitely more toyetic versus this like darker, absolutely gargantuan thing. It's just so fascinating to see how different they are in terms of approaching the exact same thing. There's also a sort of additional irony here that it's actually Fans Hobby, the third-party figure, that have packed in all of that play value, whereas the Hasbro one is much more of a sort of oversized action figure in its way. And I don't say that in a bad way at all. It's just different choices, different aesthetics, different intentions in terms of what they're aiming for. Neither of these is bad. They're both really, really good, actually. Just so varied. And obviously the Fans Hobby one has got much lighter purple, generally more saturated colours. A lot of people are going to like that. I have to say though, I do love the style of the Titan one, and I kind of feel like it's the most impressive of the two overall. You just can't get away from the size of it, the presence of it, the look of it. It is Tidal Wave in so many regards, and the Fans Hobby one is fantastic, but doesn't quite take this round for me, I don't think. That said, it's still an absolutely fine figure in its own right, and as I mentioned, I truly appreciate the fact that Fans Hobby managed to cram in all of that play value and everything that the Titan doesn't do, actually. Like, it's really weird to see that sort of flip that's going on right now, but two great options. I don't think there's particularly a right or wrong. I know which I prefer, but you could go either way on this one. Which do you prefer? But then we have one final play feature to talk about, which is combining all of the bits with Fans Hobby MB-21 as a kind of armor, powered up kind of combined mode thing. And it's very simple. You basically turn everything back into ship mode, except for the legs, which is more like the combined mode, and start slapping bits on him, basically. I mean, I say it's simple, I haven't tried it yet, so let's see how we get on. Now, obviously the aircraft carrier just attaches to the arm, totally normal thing to do, and that already feels quite heavy on there. I'm not sure how the joints on MB-21 are going to hold up, actually, not the strongest. Then it's the same thing on the other arm with the battleship. You just want to get that plugged in and attached like so. That doesn't feel too bad, actually, so far. I'm not quite sure the joints on Megatron are up to it. Okay, I would like to retract my previous statement, because just getting him to stand for this one shot was already a bit of a nightmare, because he's quite front heavy now, right? Like, he wants to lean forward. So let's get the backpack on him and see if that makes a difference. Now, there are these little plugs just here on the back of the waist and a little kind of tab slot just there, and that corresponds to these two peg holes just there and this little tab on his back. So let's see how we go. Why do I kind of feel like this is going to be a bit easier said than done somehow? Let's see. There we go. It's in place, but oh man, it doesn't seem to want to go in. I have to resort to getting him lied down, see if we can do it that way. This is super awkward. It's like it is in the right place. It's all lined up and everything, but it just doesn't want to click in. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. Okay, this is a bit of a nightmare, actually. Not going to lie. Bit of a nightmare. I mean, look, here I've pushed as hard as I physically can, and it's still not secure. Like, yeah, time for round 6, 7. I don't know, I've lost count now, honestly. Like, there are two very small pegs in there that are supposed to tab in, and they just won't stay in. Super annoying. This is an awkward process. Doesn't seem to want to go. A bit of a nightmare, I'm not going to lie. And that's kind of the result. Like, kinda. I mean, I gotta tell you, this is the absolute best I could do, right? Like, even just getting this thing to stand was a bit of a mission without the backpack falling off or MB-21's legs giving way or something. So I didn't touch it, to be honest, because I kind of feel like it's going to fall over. I mean, getting the arms on wasn't too bad, the Tidal Wave arms, but the backpack was a bit of a nightmare. And there are two configurations for it. You can actually have the Tidal Wave legs kind of pointing down as well, but I don't even give it a go. I mean, I'm going to try, here we go, but oh no, it's that up. Yeah, there you go. You see, the legs just don't support the weight, like, at all. Even these arm joints, to be honest, just aren't really up to the game. Like, it's just too much weight overall on poor old MB-21 here. And he's a great figure, but just the joints are not there for this kind of combined form. I wouldn't really bother with it personally, which is a bit of a shame, but honestly it's not the end of the world, because the overall figure here is truly quite good in my opinion. I think that they've crammed in tons of play value, maybe a little bit too much with that combined mode, but overall it all does work quite well. The thing looks super impressive. inexpensive, it's great fun right out the box, and honestly, on balance, even though that last feature is a bit naff, I gotta tell you, I think this thing is a very definite toot. Now, as I mentioned, today's review is brought to you by TF Source. You will find a link to their site in the video description below, and you can check them out for all your Transformers and third-party needs. I'd also be very grateful as ever if you could leave me a like for this video, please. But otherwise, that's it from me. So have a great rest of your day, and TTFN.